Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of BacklogBusters, where every other Monday I'm busting out my gaming backlog one video at a time and letting you know if after all these years, these games are worth playing today. In today's episode, we're learning an alternate history where the extinction of the dinosaurs was caused by one man in Turok, Dinosaur Hunter. Why out of all the early 3D first-person shooter games am I playing Turok today? Well, I've gotten quite a few suggestions to play this first Turok, and then a later entry called Turok Evolution, but since I know absolutely nothing about the series, I figured I'd start with the first one just in case there's some connecting story. I remember seeing one of the Turok games exactly one time in motion when a friend showed me this cerebral bore gun purely to demonstrate how wild this game was and how I'd never be allowed to purchase this at the time. I don't know if that's this game or another, so with almost zero context going in, let's talk about the history of Turok. Turok Dinosaur Hunter released for the N64 on March 4th, 1997 in North America and Europe, with Japan getting their version in May of the same year. And although I thought this was a console-exclusive game, apparently Turok released on Microsoft Windows in November of that same year as well. Acclaim Entertainment handled publishing, who in addition to the Turok series, published well-known games like Burnout 1 and 2, Shadow Man, and Dave Mirra Freestyle BMX 2, which surprised me because I couldn't remember a single one of their games off the top of my head. Turok was developed by Iguana Entertainment, who first developed Arrow the Acrobat, the console ports of NBA Jam, and mostly worked on the occasional sports game while focusing on the Turok series. Iguana closed its doors in August 2004 with its parent company Acclaim filing for bankruptcy and closing down a month later. But not before delivering 5 whole Turok games. The first one, this one, Dinosaur Hunter, followed by Turok 2, Seeds of Evil, a year later. Then Turok Rage Wars, a multiplayer-focused title, and finally ending their yearly release schedule with Turok 3, Shadow of Oblivion in 2000. Then after taking a much-deserved 2-year break, they released their final entry in the Turok series, Turok Evolution in 2002. Much later, Night Dive Studios developed a PC remaster of Turok 1 in 2015 and 2 in 2017, which made their way through the years to almost every single modern console. So with this first game kicking off a 5-game series over 6 years and a set of remasters, there's gotta be something about Turok Dinosaur Hunter that made it worth playing, right? Well, let's find out, starting with the things I liked. If I were to take a wild guess as to what made Turok stand out at the time, it's gotta be the combat and the movement. You feel fast, the guns and screens sway as you turn and just sprint through these levels. And while I'm not sure if it felt this smooth on the N64 originally, this remaster is the way most people today will find and play this game. The weapons feel good to fire, plus you don't have to mess with boring things like reloading. Every weapon past the pistol fires very quickly, with even the bow barely taking any time to pull back and launch off normal or explosive arrows. There's also a little bit of auto-aim on these weapons, which helps since there's no visible crosshair weirdly, but it made me feel like I just had incredible aim, even though sometimes I was just kind of firing in the general area of an enemy. Now, this game would benefit from more of a reaction or particles on the enemies to let you know you've gotten a hit on them, as later guns that are really powerful will trigger massive explosions that kind of just fill your whole screen, and who knows if you landed a hit or not. Past the gunplay, I was excited to learn that this game has a jump button, which I'm not sure how others feel about this, but I love platforming in first-person games. Maybe it's from years of hopping around in Halo 2 maps trying in vain to learn how to super jump, or just because it's not done very often. So when the game introduced a jump button along with some light platforming, then later actually required you to cross more challenging platforming sections in the campaign and these fun little bonus rooms, I thought this was so fun and different. Then the game mixed combat and platforming with an early enemy that slams the ground, sending a shockwave which you've got to leap over while still keeping your aim on the enemy. The speed, the jumps, it all really reminded me of the first Quake, which admittedly I've only played like a tiny bit of and need to go finish, but Turok came from a small studio and not one with the pedigree or previous innovation that the developers of Doom and Quake id Software had. Even without the underdog status, this just felt very satisfying and fun to play. The other thing that surprised me about Turok is how large these levels are, and they're filled with villages, castles, treehouses, and other multi-level areas with lots of nooks and crannies to explore. And sure, the other N64 shooter I finished, Perfect Dark, also has large levels, so maybe this is more common than I've always assumed, but my experience with the N64 was pretty limited, and while I've gone back to play Ocarina of Time and Mario 64, I always think of those as the exception, and I guess always come in with low expectations as to how large and full these worlds can be. Now, there's nothing in here like the multiple objectives that Perfect Dark had or GoldenEye, but there is a unique feature to these levels, more than just progress from level 1 to level 2 and so on. You'll collect keys hidden in each level, and you can actually progress through the levels in a non-linear way depending on which sets of keys you collect first. My first thought was, oh, we're gonna do a Metroid thing, and sadly not really. There's no areas gated by an item or ability. Even though you'll gain new guns throughout the entire adventure, they don't change how you interact with the environment, just how fast you dispatch enemies. But you'll still be revisiting levels and trying to explore every inch in search of these keys, which I do think is more interesting than just going straight to the exit and on to the next level. But there are some problems that sprung up for me. As the game went on, weirdly, past the first few levels, there are less keys to find, but the levels get larger. So while you're stumbling on keys easily in the first couple levels, later ones can end up with you walking back and forth over the same landscape trying to figure out what you missed. Now, some later levels do place the keys out in more open areas, but even that approach has the negative effect of letting you finish the level quicker, which also didn't sit right with me when the later levels have more platforming, more enemy variety, and just more visual, interesting scenery to explore. Luckily, there is a map, and again, in the early levels, this is extremely helpful to find sections you haven't explored. Just look for where there's an open gap in the map and head there. But the map is a thin set of color-coded lines, which lacks almost any detail. It makes it hard to understand things like teleporters and, more importantly, how those teleporters link together, which are the main way you'll traverse between sections of the map. On top of this, the map overlays directly on your screen, which is helpful while moving, I guess, if you like almost your entire view cluttered up with like a jumble of strings. Then there's the fact you can't view the map at all while paused, and all enemies in this game, from what I could tell, will respawn after a short amount of time, which leaves you just open to attacks when you're trying to figure out where you are and where you need to go next. Plus, the multi-tiered environments make the map even harder to read, and some passageways are more, I guess, secret than others and just don't show up, which makes navigating kind of a pain sometimes. While I thought the key system was interesting at first, as the levels get larger and keys more infrequent, I quickly got tired of searching the same map 5 or 6 times trying to find the one key I had left. If the map didn't block your view and just worked like a mini-map, or you could zoom or pan the map around while in a pause menu, or it just offered more detail about a key's location, or the level in general, maybe these keys would be more fun to track down in every level, rather than the few where I just naturally stumbled onto a key. My biggest issue with this game is that Dinosaur Hunter is in the title, but there's a shocking lack of dinosaurs in this game, and hunting. This is just a highly inaccurate description. I'm just defending myself from like 2 common dinosaurs that attack me the second they see me, and besides that, it's mostly humans you're fighting. Also, why are these dinosaurs even attacking me? Early ones are just plain dinos, then they start to gain mounted guns and cybernetic enhancements, but are they working with these humans, or are the humans just using them as weapons against their will? Because again, it doesn't feel like hunting or fun when I have to kill this Triceratops that some dude rode into battle like a horse. Why can't I just snipe the villain off and let the dino go free or something? Also, with a whole list of dinosaurs out there, why am I only seeing a little more than like 3 kinds throughout the entire game? Even past the dinos was a lack of variety in the human enemies and other creatures that show up, with some of the more interesting ones only showing up right at the tail end of the game, when early levels would have greatly benefited from having more variation in the enemies earlier on. There's even a lack of variety in interesting concepts, like this for sure not a dinosaur enemy that stomps and you have to jump over the shockwave, which is a cool and different interaction. It got me excited to see more of this. And did I? Nope, not really. Sadly, the same thing happens for the levels, with the real lack of environmental variety, with very samey looking areas that will all but require you to pull up that map that blocks your view of the game, or you'll be even more lost looking for keys and an exit just like I was. I was excited when the game opened and I fended off dinosaurs and humans in a jungle, but then I did that same thing for several more levels before any real variety showed up. It just all quickly blurred together. And I'd wish they'd just spread out the level and enemy variety and not saved it all till the end. But even then, I'm unsure if there's enough here that things wouldn't have gotten a little stale, even if they did that. Now, with all that in mind, how did I feel about this game overall, and would I recommend Turok Dinosaur Hunter as a game that should be on your backlog? No, I wouldn't recommend this to most people. If you've got nostalgia for this game, this modern port is very well done, and I thought it felt great to play. And if you've played every 90s shooter game and want one with platforming and an interesting key mechanic that lets you explore in a non-linear order, then you might really enjoy this. I just felt lost a lot of the time with a sense of deja vu searching similar levels with mostly the same enemies in them. There's no story or really other hook in the game, so if you don't love the combat or exploration, then this might wear out its welcome more quickly. I would have loved some story or anything to tell me why I'm here or what I'm doing. Am I in the future, in the past, in another world? Who knows? Turok isn't interested in telling you, which is odd, considering this was supposedly based on a comic book series of the same name. I enjoyed the combat, but Turok just didn't grab me in any other aspect, enough to make me truly excited to see it to the end other than to knock it off my backlog. But I am still interested in those glimmers of cool ideas that I just don't think this game really explored. I'm still curious if the later games add more variety to the enemies, the combat, and traversal, or an interesting story or other mechanics, so maybe I'll check out one of those someday. But with all that said, I'll throw out my normal message that my opinion on this game is not meant to tarnish any fond memories you have, and if you loved or still love this game, tell me why in the comments below. I'd love to hear about your experience and talk about the parts that I also really liked. If you'd like to play or replay Turok, then obviously there's the original N64 copy, and maybe I'm the only one that feels this way, but I'm continually scared to go back and play any first-person shooter on a controller with a single control stick. So there's the modern remaster by Night Dive Studios of Turok 1 and Turok 2, which play great, and you can get those games on pretty much any modern console and of course on PC, and that's where all the footage today is from. But that's it for this episode of Backlog Busters. Have you played this first Turok game? What'd you think? Is it a must-play game that deserves to be on others' backlogs? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to talk more about this. Also, let me know if you have suggestions for a game I should clear off my backlog next, and I'll work to make a video on it. If you enjoyed this, please hit the thumbs up button, and if you'd like to see more, tap the subscribe button. And as always, thank you all so much for watching, and see you in the next video.